Kingstream Entertainment. Ruslan. Kingstream Entertainment. Ruslan.
All right, so we're going to be talking about the Boulder, Colorado incident that just happened. Biden's statement about guns and Second Amendment rights. Sean Hannity somehow figuring out a way to blame BLM for this. I don't know how that works. And of course, QAnon claiming that it's a false flag and yeah. So all that with my favorite token conservative Second Amendment gun rights activist friend, Antonia Cover.
I'm doing well. Well, despite everything that's going on right now, but other than that, can't complain.
Man, these situations happen. They happen far too frequently. They are always a constant reminder that we live in a dark world. We live in a world where evil is real, where people do terrible, unimaginable, unspeakable things, and there's also people like the police officer in this situation that is extremely brave and was willing to lay down his life in this type of situation. And so it's this really bizarre thing happening. And I remember being in 8th grade, and one of the first situations like this I heard of was from Colorado, Columbine High School. And that was the first time it kind of became mainstream almost, if you will, right? Or it was like a awakening. And it was very, very sad seeing that in 8th grade and trying to process that. And it seems like they've only been more frequent. And today the president put out a statement, which I'm sure you're familiar with, never, letting a tragedy go to waste. I think people naturally have this like thing inside of us to want to do something. Like, what do we do? How do we do something, right? And essentially, it being another Second Amendment type of situation. So what is your impression of all this? How are you processing this? You lived in Boulder, Colorado for a while. And yeah, what do you make of all this?
Yeah, well, the problem when you're talking about doing something is that a lot of these people keep doing the wrong thing over and over again.
Okay.
Whatever angle that you're looking at, one, like I keep talking about, the fact is that it's just not just some, any type of law. It's a law that has to do with our Constitution and our human right, which is that the government has to protect that right. Mm-hmm. So that is an aspect of freedom with that. But also the fact that the matter is these policies are not working. Mm-hmm. So in Colorado specifically, let's just look statewide, because I already got some people trolling me already saying, oh, well, couldn't you have had someone drive in from a different city or a different state and come into that King Soopers? Sure. But the thing is, regardless of which state or city that you're in, the laws that you currently are around, like if you're in that city or state, you have to abide by those laws.
Right.
So let's start there before I get anybody trolling me on that one. So even just going to the city of Boulder actually implemented it's 2 years, because just this last Friday, a Boulder judge dismissed it, saying that's unconstitutional and they can no longer enforce it. But for the last 2 years in Boulder, they had an assault weapons ban. Mm-hmm. So an assault weapons ban, an assault weapon in Boulder terms is anything that's over 10 round magazine capacity. Actually, the whole state of Colorado has a high capacity magazine ban, which is, again, anything over 10 rounds or above of a magazine. Mm-hmm. Of course, ARs, etc., all those type of weapons as well were also banned. And then on the state level, they had red flag laws. That's another thing that people are pushing right now, saying that if we have more red flag laws, well, Colorado actually has red flag laws, is one of the most stringent in the country. And that has been in effect the last couple of years as well. And then we have universal background checks, which is something that they're trying to push right now, HR 1446 in the federal level. Colorado already has universal background checks. So that means there's no such thing as a private sale that essentially an FFL doesn't know about, right? Technically, legally. So all of those big, hot button, actual gun control laws that we're pushing and that they're trying to push right now in the wake of this tragedy is already in Colorado. And not only in Colorado, it's been around for a very long time. And Boulder especially is especially anti-gun when it comes to law. So That hasn't worked on any level. So that's what we're dealing with right now. So I don't know how many times people are going to have to tell you like gun control doesn't work. And I think that's why Christians really need to remember to push the fact that we are sinners, right? There's no law that is going to make me a morally perfect person, right? So, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. But law-wise, all of that's already implemented. All of that is already in Colorado.
That's interesting. So you're saying the knee-jerk reaction from maybe a Biden or whoever to say, hey, this is a gun issue. You're saying it's a sin issue, which obviously I agree with, right? And you're saying specifically in Boulder, Colorado, that's not necessarily that isn't the poster child for like very, open, because Colorado is not an open carry state, or is it an open carry state?
It is actually an open carry. So Colorado is an open carry state, and actually you don't even have to have a permit to open carry there. But because Boulder and Denver are both home rule cities, that means that they were in existence before the state Colorado. So they were actually able to make their own laws on a city level. So in Denver, in the city of Denver, and the city of Boulder, you're not actually have to get a permit in order to open carry. And most of the time they won't. They'll let you conceal carry, but open carry, you don't need a permit in the state of Colorado.
So you can open carry, but you can't conceal carry in Colorado?
No, you can open carry without a permit in the state of Colorado. So in Texas, for example, you actually have to have a permit to open carry.
Interesting.
And conceal carry in Texas.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So if it's not the guns, meaning they have all these safety checks in place, right? And if it's not the guns, then and somebody's pushback would then be, hey, well, if guns were illegal in America, this wouldn't have been able to happen with a knife. You wouldn't have been able to inflict as much damage with a knife as kind of what you see in Europe, right? Like there's less guns and Europeans aren't fascinated with guns, but they can't do as much damage with a knife, even if somebody has a mental breakdown like this and attempts to do something like this. Is your position or the Second Amendment position kind of like, hey, the Pandora's box is already open. This is already who we are. It's a part of our Constitution. And so you don't alleviate bad guys by telling them guns are illegal because they're just going to get guns anyway. You want to equip good guys with guns? Is that kind of the solution that you're kind of going down? I'm trying to just process this.
Good guys, right?
Yeah, the good guys.
Yeah,
yeah.
But even that whole narrative too is like, sometimes I catch myself because like, there's not a good guy. You know what I mean? Like as a Christian, we know that, right?
That's
so
good.
it's those who have evil intentions, those who have good intentions with the tool that they're the steward of stewarding their tool that they were given, the responsibility. But I'm glad you brought up knives. So people, that's the next thing. Well, if we didn't have guns, blah, blah, blah. Well, actually, if you look at the UK, for example, so the UK actually had this, I don't know if people know, but actually, I know I've been there just like a year or so ago. If you go to the UK, if you're in the UK right now, you actually can't have a knife that is above 3 inches, and they won't even give you the standard steak knife anymore. Like that's how bad it is. They have knife laws there now because they saw an increase in murders with knives a few years ago. In fact, UK has a horrible issue with knives. So much so that African countries that, like Nigeria, a lot of places that tend to have students who go there or exchange students or whatever have actually talked about in African news and other types of news that the UK has a knife issue. And so that's something that they're working with right now. If you don't believe me, I have a whole Insta story on it detailing year by year the whole knife epidemic, right? Knife epidemic, right? That's happening in the UK. You can go to Antonia_4 right on the top of my stories where you can look at the details. So obviously it's not about guns, it's not about firearms, it's not about handguns, it's not about what's going to be pushed on, it's not about rifles, right? Like again, I said 2019 statistics of the FBI have shown that more hands, feet, hammers, and clubs have been used to kill people, to murder people than rifles, okay? 2019 FBI statistics. Wow. It is about the person behind any of those tools. And yes, it can be a knife. It can be a firearm. Doesn't matter.
Interesting. Okay. So what is the solution in these situations? What do you think the solution is? Is because what we're going to hear now is common sense gun laws, common sense gun laws, common sense gun laws, right? And you're saying, based on, even if we didn't have guns and we had knives, according to what's happening in the UK, it wouldn't make much of a difference because people are evil and people are going to do evil stuff and there's sin in the world and all this kind of stuff. So taking guns away isn't really going to do much. It's just going to make it harder for people that potentially can mitigate the situations to do anything with guns, right? To fight back in a situation like this. So what do you think because everybody's like, yo, America's fascinated with guns. We have a fascination with guns, right? And that's kind of the narrative. What is the solution and how do we move forward? How do you think any of this stuff gets mitigated?
Yeah, I think it's, the reality again, and the reality is that unfortunately, there is no law that can change someone's heart. If someone's going to do harm, regardless if it's legal, right? Obviously, this is illegal, right? To murder someone, whether you have a knife legally or your firearm legally. If you're doing something to harm someone, take their right of life away, that is something that you're going to go to prison for. So just knowing that basis, not saying that there's nothing that we can do, but people are looking at it the wrong way. They look at it as if only firearms are used in situations where you're harming someone. And I'm gonna tread lightly here because we did have a police officer in this situation who lost his life trying to protect other people, obviously. As much as we respect police officers and I thank them for what they're doing, and for the most part, most of the time, particularly since this King Supers, which is a part of Kroger chain, by the way, and I'll talk about the whole Kroger open carry policy that they had pushed a few years ago. But in this situation, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you have another police officer or another person, it would have benefited him to have another person who's trained with their firearm to have a firearm and shooting at that shooter, right? So that, can we all like actually look at reality and show that yes, you would have wanted somebody else trained with a firearm in that situation who was trying to make sure that you weren't harmed in that situation. So I think that's part of the problem, is that we only see firearms in the context of I don't want to say shooter, of the murderer who is trying to do harm to other people. And then we kind of gloss over when we think, oh, the police are here. Well, what is different? What is, other than the uniform, what is truly different than other people when it comes to police officers is the fact that they have a firearm and they're able to use it, right? So that's what I'm trying to say, is that we need to have laws that would allow people who are wanting to protect other people in situations like that, or protect themselves, to be able to have that option and be able to be legally doing that. Most people are not trying to break the rules or break the laws. Most everyday citizens are trying to do the right thing, but sometimes the right thing means keeping that tool that could have actually maybe protected their life, saved their life, or saved somebody else's life at home, because they were trying to do the law-abiding thing. And that's where these issues come into place, is that we need to have laws that are actually protecting those law-abiding people, so they're doing things in a legal manner and not afraid of going to prison when we have criminals who don't care about the laws that are in place, obviously, and doing the things that they can to have the most, like I said before, the most impact at the least amount of time. And that's what they do. That's what they seek out.
Interesting. So something I didn't quite understand is when we're talking about different types of weapons, and apparently an AR-15 was used, and we're going to hear about assault weapon bans, and this whole thing. What I didn't quite understand was that there's not much of a difference between the damage an AR can do and a handgun can do outside of the round. That it's not an automatic weapon. A lot of folks have a lot of misconceptions that it's like a Uzi, or it's like it's like a silencer in a movie. They could just go pull up and spray up, and it's not. It's literally just an assault rifle, but it's not automatic, right? And so can you explain some of that? Because I think a lot of people also are confused on what the difference is. So when you hear assault weapon banned, are they assuming that we have legal rights to carry, AK-47s? What is the logic behind that?
Right. Even though, so we do have AK-47. So let me start from the beginning. So for those who don't know, AR for AR-15, AR does not mean assault rifle.
Okay.
That does not mean assault rifle. AR is actually for the person who actually made the actual firearm, which is Armalite, right? Okay. That's the inventor of the AR platform, okay. Armalite. So AR has nothing to do with being assault rifle. The assault rifle in its actual technical term is what you see in the military, which is, for the most part, is the ability to go from 3 burst rounds, 3 bursts, right? Mm-hmm. Which is several rounds at the being able to pull the trigger at the same time and have several rounds come out, a burst. Mm-hmm. Then you have a fully automatic firearm or fully automatic function, which is where you, as long as you're pulling that trigger, as many rounds that are in that magazine as many rounds are going to come out at that same time, mm-hmm. right? And then we also have semi-automatic, which is what most AR-15s are. What most handguns, revolvers. The fact of the matter is that as you pull that trigger, 1 round will come out once you pull that trigger. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. every time you pull a trigger, 1 round is extracted. So that is an AR-15. Your typical AR-15 that you have, which again is actually civilian made because it's actually the civilian version of the M4, the M16, which is military M. Mm-hmm. That is part of the military. The AR is a civilian rifle that really is no different than your typical handgun, other than it gives you more range, a longer range when you are using it for something that is not as up close, particularly like in self-defense or close on combat self-defense. So that's really the only difference, is that you have a longer range with a rifle, mm-hmm. but it's the same rounds coming out at the same times that you're pulling that trigger.
Are the bullets more powerful from an AR than from like a 9mm Glock?
Well, yeah, well, just like, but 45 is more powerful than a 9, uh-huh. right? So there's 22, which is what you'll usually, if you see like young kids hunting or whatever, usually you're seeing 22s. Uh-huh. Those are really thin, small, usually used for training. Uh-huh. Then you have the 9mm, like you were talking about, very common Glock 19, those type of firearms, handguns, which you can also have a carbine. You can also have it in a rifle form, uh-huh. as well. And then there's a 223, 5.56, which is the typical AR platform ammo that you use for those AR platforms. And honestly, it's honestly almost like the 22, the 308 on the pistol side, mm-hmm. is when you're going to the rifle side. So it really doesn't have that much firepower, and not that much more firepower than, mm-hmm. say, your standard handgun ammo.
Got it. But is it necessary, right? Because now it seems to, for whatever reason, be used in these types of situations. Like, does the average person need access to an AR-15? Like, is that what the founding fathers envisioned us to have?
Okay, so my first answer is going to be that, you know what, that's why it's a Bill of Rights and not a Bill of Needs. Okay. That's just how it is.
Okay. So a right is not the same as a need.
Having a right, well, it's a Bill of Rights, meaning that you have the right, a pre-existing right to keep and bear arms. Mm-hmm. And that's in the Constitution, that's the Second Amendment, right? Okay. So there's nothing, it says keep and bear arms. It doesn't say, you know, certain type of arms, or if you're going hunting, then you can have that caliber for that arm, or if you're for self-defense, anything that's good for that, but anything above that's a little bit too much, or what have you. It comes down to, it has a Bill of Rights for a reason, mm-hmm. because those rights are pre-existing and the Constitution is there to protect it. Mm. Now, you telling me I don't need this type of weaponry or this type of arm because you don't think I need it. Mm-hmm. Well, think about if you're having a conversation with somebody who has no idea about guns, right? That's a lot of people, even a lot of people who are making these laws and these bills these days. They don't understand firearms at all. They don't understand the caliber. If I said a 22 and I said a 308, they would think that, who knows what they would think. They don't know the difference. And so the need coming from people, lawmakers, who for the most part don't understand how these firearms and these calibers work, mm-hmm. they're the ones dictate. Do you want someone like that dictating what that need is, right? Mm-hmm. You wouldn't want that. But regardless of all that, it comes down to the fact that you have a human right to decide which arms is best for you and your family and those that you care about, to make sure that you can, in that situation, have the upper hand.
Because it's a
criminal
right.
comes to me, right? Well, it's a right, but also the whole, oh, well, why do you need a firearm? Why do you need an AR? Is really, in that situation, just showing a lot of, you wouldn't want somebody else making that determination for you.
Yeah.
You need to make that decision for yourself and what's best for you. And again, it comes down to that person who's behind it. Because you were saying most of these things happen with rifles. Actually, statistics have shown over and over again, less than 1% of these mass shootings, which FBI considers 3 fatalities or more, as a mass shooting, less than 1% of these shootings actually are used with rifles.
Interesting.
Less murders are used with rifles than, again, like I said before. So for the most part, even 22s, the Virginia Tech shooting that happened a few years ago in Virginia, he used a 22. He used a 22 handgun in order to harm that many people. So it has nothing to do with the actual caliber being high power or what have you.
Yeah.
It has to do with the person who's trying to harm you.
Yeah, and then we saw, in New York, I think there was somebody that drove a car through Times Square, right? So people can use things out of their intended purpose to harm people. I guess then somebody would push back and say, well, yeah, but is an AR really for hunting, or is it for protection? And when someone's misusing it, abusing it. So in this case, what seems to be happening is whenever something like this happens, the politicians and the media tend to spin it and make it more about, hey, this is a gun issue, let's pass common sense gun laws. And your response would be, hey, this is a humanity issue. This is is this a mental health issue? And therefore we should all be more educated on guns. I'm just trying to understand the paradigm, because it does seem like a knee-jerk reaction to always go into gun control. Like, we need better gun laws. And you're like, nope, Denver has all these gun laws. They have all this stuff. But it's really bizarre that it's also an open carry state. That's really fascinating to me, because California, where I'm at, has a lot of gun laws, but at the same time, you're definitely not open carrying in California, and you got to apply for concealed carry. So I'm just thinking, like, would any of that made a difference? I know I'm saying a whole lot. I'm processing this in real time.
Well, California was actually an open carry state until Ronald Reagan, which is who was the governor at the time. And I think most people know this story about the Black Panther. So they were actually they had a legal right, obviously also a human right. They were protesting openly at the time in California, and at that state capitol, they had firearms. They had ARs. And after that, they actually implemented canceling open carry after that. And that was Ronald Reagan who did so.
And Ronald Reagan, who is a Republican conservative.
No,
wow, I didn't know that.
Actually wrote letters to other Republicans to sign the assault weapons ban of '94. So he wasn't a great president on the Second Amendment. I'm going to get some people on that one, but you guys can look it up.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he wasn't a good president on the Second Amendment. But it started in California when he was a governor and actually took away open carry. So it was cool to open carry until Black folks were open carrying at the state capitol. Interesting. When I say gun control is racist, people just laugh at me and Maj Touré and all these people, like, as if we don't know the facts. Like, we know the facts. We know Black history, and it's been those who, think about it, those who want to oppress other people, of course they're going to implement gun control. Wow. Of course. Interesting. Okay. So, yeah. That's real. I didn't know that about Ronald Reagan. Okay, so it seems like there's a spin on the media and spin by politicians to say we need to ban assault rifles. But then the opposite extreme of this is kind of what we're seeing from the Q community. And there's an article trending right now and this is wild. I don't know how people make these jumps, but there's influential leaders from the Q community that are saying this is a false flag staged by actors because they want to take our guns away, right? So I think me and you are seeing it on the surface and being like, yeah, this is oddly convenient to start talking about gun control again. But then the Q community is going further, and they're full on saying, no question, Boulder, Colorado incident today was a false flag. The only question is which side. False flag means it's fake. Nobody actually died.
Wow, this is wild. So this is from a popular QAnon Telegram channel with more than 200,000 subscribers. This false flag was executed about as cleanly as Biden on a staircase. So,
oh no.
What do you think of that when it goes to the opposite extreme? When we could objectively look and we could say, hey, this is convenient. The timing of this is interesting, and then the Q people are taking it and saying this was all staged and all fake.
Yeah, I think going back to, remember when I said the first time I was on, I was saying that did mass shootings just end or stop last year? No, of course there were mass shootings that were happening, but they weren't covered on TV. And unfortunately, unless it's covered on TV, it doesn't exist, right? Like social media, like unless it's Facebook official, it's not official type of mentality of if it's not covered on TV, it must not be important enough or must not have actually happened, right? Particularly if it's not on certain types of television stations. They're depending on the person, they might not agree with you or think it's quote unquote fake news, but the thing is, these things continue to happen. They've always happened, and they've happened before. It's just when the media decides to cover it or not. And actually, I've seen several mass shootings in this scale, to be honest, in a lot of different states. And unfortunately, the big national media never picked it up. And so it'd be local and or stay statewide. So in Colorado, they had issues with that like a couple years ago. And I remember thinking, okay, maybe this is going to be picked up by national news. It was never really picked up. And for the ones that were, I remember in California, like a couple years, like last year or a couple years ago, they had 2 back-to-back in California. Well, after like 24-hour cycle, it was hardly in the news. So obviously, these things exist and they've always existed and this happens, right? There are evil people doing evil things. It's just the news not picking it up. That's what we're seeing. And they decide to politicize the ones that they want for their agenda, to push their agenda. Unfortunately, that's what we're seeing right now.
Interesting. Okay. Somehow, Sean Hannity decided to make this an issue and blame BLM for it, basically saying because BLM was hostile towards police officers, this is what you get when you have hostility from police officers. Let me pull up the quote. We're often so reminded and then we forget. Hannity said, remember, what do we want? Dead cops. What do we want them now? Pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. Bottles, rocks, bricks, Molotov cocktails. They're not riots, we're told all summer. So on and so forth. But these are the cops that got put in harm's way. And in this case, we lost one tonight. So I don't know how he ties this in and makes the logical conclusion that this is the fault of the BLM protests. But it is astonishing to me that that becomes the conclusion from one of Fox News' biggest personalities. I don't think anybody has answers. It seems like everybody's grasping for straws, right? It's like you got the QAnon folks saying it's made up. You got Fox News blaming Black Lives Matter, and you got the left blaming guns. And in a state that has universal background checks and has all the laws that they could seemingly has all the laws that they could possibly have. It's a really interesting time in history to see all of this play out, and I don't really know what to make of it and how do we I think there's something here with regards to mental illness, and I think there's something here with regards to up spikes in how people are dealing with their mental illness in terms of maybe the medications people are taking, maybe the pressures of life. I don't know what it is, but maybe there's a correlation there. But it seems like there's definitely been an uptick in the last 25 years, 30 years with these types of situations. Would you say that's true, or would you say that this has historically been going on in America in terms of situations like this where we would have mass shootings?
Yeah, I mean, again, like if the FBI statistic is 3 or more mass shootings, there's a lot more that occurs than what we see on TV. So unfortunately, but yeah, I don't want to trivialize it because it's always coming back to, it's like, are we sinners? Yes. Like, does sin continue to exist? Does evil it continue to prevail? Unfortunately, yes, absolutely. We know that. So since we do know that, I hope the viewers, that the audience, they're Christians as well, and they understand that, then we know that it's not it's not going to be the law that's going to be that medicine. Can it be something that can help? I'm not saying, obviously, I'm not saying, we'll just do away with all laws because, well, we're sinners, right? I'm just saying that if you're even going to go in that direction, then why are we going in a direction that continues to even statistically show that it fails constantly, right? Why is that always it's nothing new, right? This call for gun control happens every single time after a shooting, and yet shootings continue to occur, right? So it's not something that's actually new when it comes to this. And like going back to what you were saying before, I think a big issue that I'm seeing is a lot of people who won't even listen to the solutions because of what you're saying, like people talking about BLM when it has nothing to do with this situation going on right now. So I think that's what we need to do, is remember to bring it back to the actual issues and not try to start blaming that side or the other, just so they can push, their narrative.
Interesting. Real quick, I don't know if you know this, Antonia, but over 53% of the people who watch this channel are not subscribed. It is so unfortunate. Don't be a goofy and watch this without subscribing. Hit that subscribe button, turn the bell notification on so you don't miss another live stream like this, and make sure you hit the like button and let us know where you're watching this from. Now back to our conversation with Antonia Culver, who is a spokesperson for Gun Owners of America, and we're talking about what happened in Boulder, Colorado, the subsequent response to it. My logic goes like this, and maybe I'm wild for thinking like this. Whatever has caused this, whether it is more access to guns, whether it's mental illness, whether it's a combination of the two, whether it's, I don't know, whatever it is, I don't know what the core. Obviously, there's sin. Obviously, there's people who are broken. Obviously, there's issues happening in society that are deeper. They're existential. They're not just on the surface. There's something going on, and I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because we're fascinated with guns and America is just more violent. We just like guns, because that's sometimes the caricature, right? Of people from other places that think they're more sophisticated, like New Zealand and Australia and the UK, right? They just kind of make this, America's just, fascinated with guns. So I don't know what the issue is, and I don't know what the solution is. What I do know is my thinking goes, well, if this is where we are as a society, if this is where we are as a culture, if this is where we are, I am not going to be the type to say I am anti-gun, and then when something goes down, I grab my phone only to call other guys with guns to help protect me. Like that, to me, that logic to me doesn't make sense, right? And that's kind of like, we're like virtue signaling, like guns bad, 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 very bad, bad, right? And then it's like, yeah, but when something goes down, what do? You go call somebody with a weapon to come and protect you, or what? You pull out your knife, like, right? And that's the part where to me it becomes non-practical and not pragmatic. It's more about the virtue of I am a pacifist and I'm going to be non-violent. And I'm like, yeah, like all of that. Seldom do I think violence is ever appropriate in most situations. However, if I'm in a situation where I'm with my family, I'm shopping at Kroger, my Whole Foods, and it goes down, I mean, I'd much rather have it on me than not have it on me, right? I'm much rather, legally speaking, have a conceal and carry permit, and so I think that's the part where I just don't understand the far left side of the argument is like, yeah, like, and I don't know, maybe there needs to be more background checks. Like I know when I bought a firearm in California, I had to wait 10 days. There's a 10-day cool down period. And then I bought another firearm and then there was another 10-day cool down. And that second 10-day cool down period, I didn't understand because I'm like, I just bought one of these 2 months ago. Why do I have to
cool down period?
Say it again.
Do you call it a cool down period?
That's what they call. I think that's what it's called, right? A cool, like just in case you lost it and you want to go in and get a firearm and do something terrible.
They want that. I mean, just that narrative right there. They want you, who's just trying to get a gun, right? Cool down period, like as if like you're only gonna get a gun because you're angry, like that type of stuff. Like, which I think is a not fair presumption, right? I agree, it's not a fair presumption. However,
if it helps alleviate potential violence or domestic violence or someone committing suicide, which we know a high percentage of these shootings are self-inflicted, right? A high percent. I don't know what the percentage is, so I'm just, you know these numbers better than I do, but I do know a high percentage of these are self-inflicted, right, in terms of the gun violence in America. And if they have a law that says, hey, cool down, I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. Like, I'll fine, 10 down, cool down. It's fine. The second time, I'm kind of like, okay, like I just got one of these. You want me to cool down again? And then when you start getting into, well, if you want this kind of thing, you got to have this thing on it to not let you use it like this thing. And it's all these additional layers to it. And so that's the part where I don't understand, and I don't know what are there, that'd be my question to you. So as the gun expert, are there some reasonable, we're not gonna say common sense, are there some reasonable gun laws that you feel like are maybe beneficial?
Reasonable gun laws, yes. I believe that people should have constitutional carry. There should be no reason why the government is keeping an actual tax and a financial barrier from those who are wanting to protect themselves. Like that's the only reasonable gun laws that I think should be implemented, is the fact that we shouldn't be having to ask for permission to get our rights protected. So that is literally my definition of what that looks like. Because again, like I've shown over and over again, you were talking about mental illness before, and I talked about red flag laws. I'm not sure if you know what red flag laws are, but I want to say it's a movement, but it's really, it's a situation in Colorado, for example. How they implement it there is that anyone who has any type of affiliation with you, say was an ex-roommate, an ex-girlfriend, boyfriend, obviously a current one, a family member, as long as they were living with you for about 6 months, and then also might have an acquaintance with you, they have the right, through this law, to be able to call your sheriff's office, let them know that you have a firearm and that you think that they are dangerous to other people or themselves. That's all they got to do. Don't even have to put their name down.
Okay.
They call the sheriff's office. Because of the law that is implemented in Colorado today, they are allowed to implement a no-knock order, right? By the way, Breonna Taylor, that was a no-knock warrant. That was a no-knock warrant, just so you know. So they're able to legally use a no-knock warrant. Usually one of the time they're trying to go 5 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning. For example, Breonna Taylor, that was at what? 12 p.m., 1 a.m. in the morning. Yeah. So they are obviously going in a time where they don't think that you are able to resist, likely. So they get that because of that order, go into your home and seize without anything, without even letting you know, don't have to, seize your firearm, and then take it to a judge who will then, based on that law, have a whole year to say that you are not fit to have a firearm for that 1 year.
Wow.
And by the way, that same person who made that anonymous phone call can continue to make that phone call in Colorado law without any repercussions. So they can continue to make sure that you get your gun taken away from you, go to a court, to a judge who has therefore the ability to have an ex parte hearing, which means that you don't have to be at that hearing at that time. They make that decision, can't have that firearm. You for a year are not able to have a firearm for a whole year because of someone picking up the phone saying that you're a danger to yourself or someone else. A danger to yourself or someone else has shown in Colorado to be everything from I'm upset with my ex-boyfriend or my ex-girlfriend. These are, you can go and look up the actual cases happening right now, to literally an ex-prisoner of a Sheriff Reams of Weld County in Colorado, an ex-prisoner because he was housed in the same area, for 6 months, who actually called and actually put that red flag log on the sheriff because he obviously had a vendetta against this guy.
Wow.
So that's the type of stuff, and this is like the model red flag law that we have in this country right now. So that's the type of laws that unfortunately it takes a great idea in theory of, if someone shouldn't have a firearm, then we should take that firearm, until they're able to use that firearm again in a safe manner. The problem is that when we always go to government first, then the only way they're actually able to implement it in a way that makes sense to the government is a way where they're taking your rights away. They're taking away your Second Amendment right on that situation. They're taking away search and seizure in that right. They're going into your home without permission, without any type of search warrant, really, other than a no-knock search warrant saying that they can get it just because of a law that was there in place way before you, not because of your specific situation. They're taking, it's like over and over and over again where it shows that red flag laws do not work when it comes down to the actual application in your everyday life. I mean, even sheriffs have said no to this because think about it in a police point of view. 2 o'clock in the morning, trying to literally steal someone's firearm for their home without letting them know, and they don't know who it is, more than likely that police officer is getting shot or somebody else is getting shot because that's probably the first thing that you're going to be doing is someone's barging into your home unannounced because a search warrant said that they can't.
Gotcha.
So that's the type of legislation, unfortunately, when we have solutions that are thought of in that manner, then we actually have more problems that get people hurt and killed and also left defenseless because they're part of this, whole scheme from someone else who simply just wants to get them in trouble. So that's what we've been seeing in Colorado in just the last 2 years alone. That's what's going on right now with red flag laws.
And it seems like what's happening is you have folks who are genuinely, I'm going to presume, genuinely wanting to do something and do something helpful, but maybe because they don't quite understand how guns work, they don't understand the difference, that there isn't much of a difference between a handgun and an AR in terms of the number of rounds it could fire in a second and all that kind of stuff, that the intent may be coming from a good place, but every application that we've seen it flush out and play out, it seems like it's not that effective. They're trying to limit people's right, and whether or not you believe it, and I don't think anyone here, by the way, no one here is saying the Constitution and the Bible are equivalent. Like, that's not what we're saying. We're saying, hey, there is a innate value as a human to defend yourself, right? Period. Whether that's with a stick, a rock, a gun, a tank, whatever, right? You have a right to defend yourself. And by the way, this right is also legally extended to Americans, which is unique. But it seems like they're coming from the right place, the folks that are writing these laws, coming from the right place, and genuinely trying to do something. Again, we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt, but just not being close enough to the culture of what the Second Amendment community is about. And it's, again, we can very easily make a caricature out of people and just say, yeah, like, they're just white hillbillies who just are obsessed with guns. And it's like, actually, as you guys are paying attention, like, Antonia is showing us that one of the biggest demographics of people who want to arm themselves is actually women and survivors, right? That there's a huge black women, right? Yeah. So let's not make caricatures of people who you think are a certain archetype and dismiss everybody as like gun nuts who just want to build caves in their backyard and prep for the, whatever. That it's way broader than that, right? And a lot of folks that you would think aren't into guns are into guns and do find value in whether there's a hunting aspect to it, the casual shooting aspect to it, or just the ability to, hey, you know what? I feel comfortable sleeping at night because I know that I have something in case something goes down. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Talk to me about the folks who are writing these laws, and why do you think they fall so short? Is it just utter ignorance, or do you think it's something more malicious happening?
I mean, I don't know everybody's heart, right? So only God knows. But I do think it's a good combination of a lot of it. There's those who know that they don't know anything about firearms, and actually I've seen multiple times where they're proud to be willfully ignorant, where they will say they will never touch a firearm, they will never shoot a firearm, but yet they're completely okay with dictating people's lives based on this thing that they never want to educate themselves on. So that's actually probably a big handful of legislators that I've spoken to on the state level, the city level. I'm in Houston, so for those who don't know, I think Houston, I think some people think that they know that Houston's actually a pretty progressive city.
Yeah.
It is, meaning anti-gun. So it's not Texas, and Texas has its own issues as well. But I mean, I'm in Sheila Jackson Lee's district. Like, I live in there. Okay, so I know for a fact, if you've seen that clip, I don't know if you've ever seen it, Ruslan, where she talks about an AR-15 and says it's as heavy as like 10 boxes, right? Things like that. Like, that's the type of stuff. Sheila Jackson Lee has been in office for decades, and she has not done the research that she needs to do on bills that she continues to push every single year. HR 127 is Sheila Jackson Lee's bill, and yet she doesn't have that information. So that's the majority, I believe. I do believe there are those who are trying to do things from a good place, but I think you, as a legislator, though, you have an extra responsibility to be educated on whatever you're trying to push, or at least surround yourself with people who are educated on a policy that you are trying to push. And if you're not, then you're just not being intellectually honest, to be honest. So I think that's also part of it. When it comes to the lawmakers, everyday people, look, I didn't know about this world. I didn't know about any of these things. I didn't shoot a firearm until I was 25, when I realized personally that I could protect myself as a sexual assault survivor, and those females around me as well on college campuses that were concerned about being assaulted again, because 1 out of 5 women are going to be assaulted. That was a real thing for me. That was a personal thing for me. When I talk to women who are veterans, who are also sexual assault survivors, who actually tell me about red flag laws and being concerned about that, because mental illness, right, mental health in these days can mean anxiety, can mean being on antidepressants, can mean being a lot of slew of these mental health illnesses that are very common, but the government sees you as a mental health risk, and so therefore says that, look, I know that you have issues with PTSD because you were an assault survivor, but we think it's dangerous in your hands, so we're gonna have to take that away from you. Like, that's what a lot of these survivors are telling me about red flag laws. I mean, I'm a survivor myself, so I know the actual implications and the applications of these laws. I understand there are those who have a good intent behind them, not trying to demonize the left or demonize those who are trying to go in these routes and these solutions. I'm just telling you that they don't work. And so if they don't work, you guys got to look at something else that actually works. I mean, even if I weren't a pro-gun advocate, I would say that.
Again, guys, 53% of the folks watching this channel, hundreds of thousands of people a month, are not subscribed. So do me a solid, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. Let us know where you're watching this from. Do you think that when someone is on edge and could potentially commit an act like this, you're saying the red flag laws are too broad, right? And someone like you who's a survivor, someone like me who's a survivor, I've been to a therapist, I have onset PTSD. You're saying by the logic of some of the red flags laws, I may not be permitted from getting a firearm because of my onset PTSD from being molested as a child. You're saying that's not good. I would agree with you. However, how do we see someone that might be on the edge of committing a heinous act, right, and doing something wild? Like, I'll give you a personal example, and I think it does come back to us personally dealing with it, but I'll give you a personal example. One of my buddies been going through some stuff. We wanted to talk to, he wanted to just hang out and talk to me, and I kind of had to ask him a series of questions because I wasn't sure what was happening with him from his mental health standpoint. Like, what's going on? Where are you at? What kind of thoughts are you having? Is it to harm yourself? Is it to harm others? You know, talk me through this. And once we talked, I realized it was more so him having shame from his past and feeling like people may come to harm him, and he wasn't getting enough sleep and all this kind of stuff. So we had a really beautiful conversation, but I felt it personally, like, hey, bro, what's going on? And we walked and talked, and once I got more context of it, I felt way better about the situation, that he's not having these violent urges and wanting to do something crazy. But how do we do with those situations? How do we deal with those situations? If you're saying, how do we, if someone is going through it and on the edge of potentially committing a heinous act like this, like the one in Atlanta, there has to be red flags, right? That, not to play on word, there has to be signs. There has to be something that, hey, this is dangerous. What is your take on that?
I think it's important because in general, it's taboo to talk about mental illness and mental health. And I think it's just people need to remember that just because you have a mental illness does not make you dangerous. Okay. There are people who are dealing with issues that for the most part, they're dealing internally, and it has to just deal with themselves. Now, on that, I will say that part of the solutions, again, comes down to your community. So, for example, I told you about me being a survivor. That did not have it's not like I didn't have any ramifications from that mental health wise. Look, I'm just going to be transparent. I'm on medication today. Like, I'm on antidepressants and anti-anxiety. You don't get raped at 5 years old and not have issues. Okay. You don't have, certain different things that happen because of being sinned against, right? You were talking about medication on one of your other videos about common grace. I do believe that is a common grace that God has given to us, whether it's therapy or medication. So those things, though, unfortunately, if you talk to a health professional, etc., they would think that you are a threat to yourself or someone else. More than likely a threat to yourself, but regardless of threat. And I know I'm not a threat, right? Because just because I'm dealing with an illness doesn't mean that I'm going to harm someone because of it. Doesn't mean you're crazy because of it. Doesn't mean that you're going to commit acts of evil because of it. So I think that right there, that should be an important disclaimer right there, that doesn't equate to that. But on top of that, there's actually community solutions. So for me, there was a time when I had to tell my friends and family, look, I'm not in a good place right now. I need you to take my firearms for a while. And because you know me best, know that I'm in a good place again to be able to have my firearms. And this has happened before. I'm not saying like, this is a pie in the sky. This has happened before where my family and those who cared about me took the things that would be dangerous, not just firearms or pills or whatever, because I was in a vulnerable state until there was a point where I knew I was healthy again, or even a health professional said, you're healthy again, that I could have firearms back in my reach and have access to it. So there's also an organization on the nonprofit side called Hold My Guns. So if you guys are looking for different places, called holdmyguns.org. They are a nonprofit that actually works with gun ranges and gun stores, which are prevalent throughout the country. And they will actually have your firearms given to them, voluntary, right? Given to them for a time, and they will hold your firearms until you're at a time when you can go back and retrieve them. So that's part of the community-based, solutions that a lot of us can actually implement as a solution that doesn't always go into government. Okay,
here's a good question. Are grenades, machine guns, and RPGs okay? That kind of becomes the logical conclusion with some of this. So what are you saying, Antonia? Are you just saying we're all just supposed to have Uzis and tanks and right? Like, what's your answer to that?
If someone gave me an Uzi or a tank right now, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna use it to harm somebody. Right. Again, like whether I have a 22 or I have a fully automatic. I've shot a fully automatic before, and I didn't use that to start murdering other people. Yeah. So it comes down to the person who's wielding that firearm.
I think if we're thinking about folks going out to a bar and now we are in a situation, I'm just going to use this as a metaphor, where there's a lot more people who know mixed martial arts, right? And I think what happens is if you're in an area where that's a thing and people know it and people train and that's an immersion of the community, I think what the logical conclusion is that, there's just going to be more hostility. Everybody's just going to beat their brains in, right? I think how that actually plays out is with more people who have restraint and know martial arts, you're going to be way less likely to pop off at the mouth at somebody at the bar. You're going to be way less likely to try to have a road rage incident, pull over and because if you know that, I'm in a demographic where there's a lot of folks that got hands and can fight, and it could go ugly for me because this is the community. I think to a degree, the answer to that is if you know you're in an area where people are armed, you're probably going to be less likely to go in and do something wild versus if you're in an area where it's a gun-free zone in a right. I think that's
well, for example, Switzerland literally, after you leave the army, the military, which that's mandatory, you're able to keep your firearm. So a lot of people in Switzerland actually have firearms at home because of their mandatory service. So Switzerland, like that's the epitome, right? People think about peace, like they're armed to the teeth. When you talk about people who are armed to the teeth, they literally are armed to the teeth when it comes down to firearms, and yet it's a peaceful society. So, and the opposite of that, you look at Japan and South Korea. I love South Korea. I love the culture. We were just talking about that last week with the panel, but they have one of the highest. They go back and forth of having one of the highest suicide rates in the world. So, and they have very, very strict gun control laws. So it's not about what laws are in place when it comes to firearms. It comes back to the people and so many other different levels.
Yeah, that's good. And I think all of us just being more attentive to our friends and family, especially with the lockdown and people not being able to come and go, people not being able to go to the gym. I know one of my buddies was a Marine. He used to cut my hair, barber friend of mine, and he talked about how he had all these guys that they would get together and go hunting and go shooting, and it was a time for a lot of these dudes who served overseas and had PTSD to talk through their issues and how it was one of the most flourishing things that they were a part of as folks who served in the country didn't always have the option to get therapy or didn't feel safe, that he created this group of guys that would get together, that would shoot, that would barbecue every week. And he found it to be extremely helpful and a utility for people. I think, my opinion, maybe the breakdown isn't in our obsession with guns, because like you pointed out, there's other countries like Switzerland who have guns. Maybe the issue is our lack of connection. Maybe the issue is our lack of community. Maybe the issue is we're so fragmented as a society, we don't check up on our friends. We don't see how our friends are doing. If somebody's skips 2 weeks of church and they're your friend or your acquaintance, do you check in on them? Do you see how they're doing, right? And my heart will be, hey, let's be better friends. Let's be better brothers, cousins, sisters. Let's check in on people because you don't know what's going on in somebody's life. You don't know what they're going through, whether it manifests in someone doing something so violent or they harm themselves. And I've had friends that have succumbed to suicide, and it's terrible. So I think that's the deeper issue. Maybe isn't just about violence and guns. The deeper issue is, as a society, are we loving our neighbor as ourselves? Are we asking people how are they doing? Are we pressing into vulnerability in relationship instead of pulling back and being like, well, that's their business. I'm going whatever. I'm going to do my thing, right? So I think there's something there. Any final thoughts, final words? We definitely got to have you back on. I always love your perspective. What are your final words, final thoughts as a young Black woman who's a gun rights advocate?
Well, I was going to say when you were talking about that, we have we as Christians especially is why I'm so passionate about this, is that this is an opportunity for us. This is an opportunity for us to stop. I mean, people are going to secular answers, which honestly laws and all these, whether gun control or whatever, these are all secular answers. People are going to these things thinking that it's going to heal people, right? They really believe that. And we should be offering the real hope. We should be offering what the real truth is when it comes to a lot of these things. And I think there are people who right now, we remember, who was it that was making fun of thoughts and prayers, right? Like now that's a thing that people can't even say anymore. I'm giving my
I saw that on
prayers.
Twitter.
Like,
I saw that on Twitter.
Yeah, so we have to speak up. We need to be in this space just like we need to be in situations and conversations about race. Right. So we need to bring people back to why we believe what we believe and the hope that is in that and the truth that comes from that. So people are awakened to what the real issue is. Right. Yeah. Obviously, we can be a part of policy, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't. In fact, I think we should. But if we're not leading people to the real hope, to Christ, then we're not doing what the Great Commission calls us to do. We're not leading people to what the real hope and answer is. So I just implore Christians to please be a part of this conversation. People are going to talk about it probably for the next week or so. Don't shy away from it. This is a time for us to speak up and speak the truth in love. Ephesians 4:15.
I love it. I love it. Antonia, thank you so much, guys. Check her out on social media, Instagram, all that kind of stuff. Shoot her some questions if you have some questions. I think at the very least, talk to, if you're like, I don't like guns, talk to somebody that's different. Talk to somebody, because she was in your shoes before, right? And I'm not like the big, like I ain't got no ARs or anything like that. I'm not that, but I definitely own some firearms, and I like to go shoot. And I got buddies that, you know, probably a bit more in that world than I am, but I appreciate the dialogue, and I appreciate hearing it from somebody that knows the laws better than me, that understands how these things play out. So thank you so much, sis. And thank you guys for watching, man. Hopefully you enjoyed this conversation. Give this a like, and stay tuned. I'll be back later on live tonight. All right.
Joshua the king came down and bore it all. Yeah. Conversations front of the fireplace. All of my mistakes out of I erase. Wanna operate at a higher pace. Birth pains causing the body to dilate. On a first name basis with the worst pain facing.